What's happening? Hope everyone had a great and safe long weekend. You're listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with Michael Lev. We're going to be talking a lot of things happening in the Arizona Wildcats sports scene. Please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And for all coverage of spring sports, go to Tucson.com and the Wildcast app. This podcast, Lev and I are going to be talking about a lot of Arizona baseball. Plus, we'll get into a little bit of U of A football recruiting, and we'll look back on the incredible life lived by Bill Walton, who passed away on Memorial Day. It only makes sense that Bill Walton outlived the Pac-12 just by a day. And it's very poetic, symbolic, and we'll get into our Bill Walton stories and just the great life that he lived, both as a basketball player and a human being. Bill Walton is certainly one of one. And we'll talk about that later on in the podcast because Lev and I both have a lot of great things to say about Bill. But Lev, Arizona baseball is hosting a regional in Tucson, Arizona. Hi Corbett Field is getting the Tucson region. And it's a loaded field, first and foremost. And we'll get into, those teams and the challenges that presents Arizona. But, man, what a weekend for Arizona baseball. And really what a year for the University of Arizona athletic department, because as we all know, this is the last year of the Pac-12. And a lot of great things have happened for Arizona in the last year of the Conference of Champions. I mean, if you just start off with the fall, you had the Arizona football team go 10-3, win the Alamo Bowl, have this incredible season. And then you add in Arizona men's tennis and the incredible magical season that they had under Clancy Shields, winning the Pac-12 and also the Pac-12 tournament. And then you add in both basketball programs going to the postseason, Arizona men's golf going to the NCAA championships. I mean, if you look across the board for Arizona sports, what a year for the Wildcats. And to cap things off, for the very last Pac-12 sporting event ever, it only makes sense that Arizona baseball would win in walk-off fashion because that's how they've done it all season long. And not only do they win in walk-off fashion, but Tommy Splain, the guy who was benched earlier in the year for a younger player at Andrew Kane, like there were just so many layers that went into Arizona's walk-off win over USC. You were in Scottsdale for it all. How do you put this into words?
Well, first of all, there's this feed called College Basketball Report, and according to them, there are 6 schools that had made an FBS bowl game and qualified for the NCAA tournament in men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and softball. Those 6, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Duke, and Arizona. So that puts it in a little bit of perspective, just how good of a year it was for Arizona sports, despite, some tumult. Changes, football coach left, athletic director was fired, president has announced that he's leaving. So there's been a little bit of chaos, and it hasn't affected the performance on the field for these athletes one bit. Yes, I was up in Scottsdale, third and final Pac-12 baseball tournament. It took years and years for the Pac-12 to finally have a baseball tournament. They tweaked the format in year 2, and they made it so much better, and it was a great event. Absolutely loved covering it. Any fans who ever went up there, they had a great time enjoying it and experiencing it. And now it's gone, which is sad in a lot of ways. It's all too brief for the Pac-12 baseball tournament. Arizona had been one of only 2 programs to make the semifinals in each of the first 3 years, along with Stanford. And they became the 3rd winner of the event. Stanford won it previously. Oregon won it last year. Now Arizona has. And as you said, it was absolutely fitting for it to end that way because that's how Arizona baseball has rolled this year. So not only was it like yet another walk-off, okay?
8 to be total, right?
8 walk-offs on the season, but it was the same score as the Oregon State game the previous week, 4-3. They won it in the same inning, the 9th inning. Same starting pitcher, Cam Walty. Same uniform combination, the red tops, the white pants, and the military hats. Tommy Splain scored the tying run against Oregon State. He drove in the winning run against USC. So there was a lot of symmetry there, a lot of good karma for the Wildcats, and they're going to hope to take that into this week in Tucson.
Unbelievable finish for Arizona in the Pac-12 tournament, and like Lev said, they won their last baseball game, their last Pac-12 baseball game, the last Pac-12 sporting event in Tucson, period, in walk-off fashion. And then you do it in the Pac-12 tournament. It almost seems like this year's team is kind of like a team of destiny. Now, I know they got a tough draw. Like, don't get me wrong, the teams that are coming to Tucson, oof, good luck, Arizona. But, man, between their series win over UCLA, how they ended the season, I'm all in on Chip Hale and these Arizona Wildcats.
Yeah, there's a great sense of belief that they have, confidence. Chip has created a really good culture too, where, I mean, they all support one another. He was one of his goals this year was to kind of take down the wall that sometimes forms between the hitters and the pitchers, and I think that, I mean, there was definitely a disconnect between the two in recent seasons because the hitting was really good and the pitching was not holding up its end of the bargain. He changed that by bringing in Kevin Vance to be the pitching coach. Their performance has improved a great deal, and it's kind of an all for one for all mindset and mentality over there at Hi Corbett. As you mentioned, the regional is really tough. Grand Canyon, I think, is a difficult opening opponent. Even though Grand Canyon kind of backed its way into the tournament, this is a really weird thing for those who aren't familiar. So Tarleton State is in the WAC and participated in the WAC tournament, even though they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament because they're still completing their transition from Division II to Division I. Justin, somehow this takes 4 years.
They got the Jacksonville State treatment at first?
Just yeah, exactly. This blew me away. They're in their 4th year of making the transition. Like, do we really need 4 years to pull this off?
That's wild.
So A, do we need that? B, why are they in the WAC tournament if they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament? Anyway, so they win. They're not eligible. Grand Canyon, as the regular season champion, gets the bid out of the WAC, one bid league. They took 2 out of 3 from Arizona this year. And the last time they played, Grand Canyon scored 24 runs in 7 innings and won 24-8. Now, a lot of that came against pitchers who will not be on the roster for the NCAA tournament. Okay. Midweek games, you're not throwing your best guys. So it's a different in that regard. I think we're going to see Clark Candiotti on Friday. Even though he hasn't been the number 1 starter, I think they're going to shuffle the rotation based on recent performances. Grand Canyon hasn't seen him. Arizona hasn't seen Grand Canyon's best. The two teams very familiar with each other, so I think it's a tricky matchup. On the other side, you've got West Virginia, which went 19-11 in the Big 12, and they have J.J. Weatherholt, middle infielder, who's going to be a top 10 pick in the MLB draft. He came to Tucson last year, and he just destroyed the Wildcats. Like, he was unbelievably good. We're all like, who is this guy? He put himself on the map right there. And then Dallas Baptist had number 17 in RPI. I mean, they could have been a host themselves. And they have one of the best pitchers in college baseball in Ryan Johnson, who's got unbelievably good stats. He's going to be a first-round pick also. The good news is for Arizona is he'll go in the first game in all likelihood, right, against West Virginia. So they probably won't have to see him over the course of the weekend. But it certainly feels like that, a very difficult regional for Arizona. But hey, you know what? They'd rather be here than anywhere else because great home field advantage, quirky ballpark. If you're not used to playing at Hi Corbett, I mean, it's huge. Like, Chip has compared it to Coors Field multiple times. The elevation isn't quite as high here, but the ball does fly, and you've got to cover a lot of ground in the outfield.
And great setting too, right around 6-7 o'clock when that sun is going down. Best sunset in college baseball, if you ask me. But going into the selection show, Lev, did you feel like the committee would get it right? Because going into it, it seemed like, hey, if we're just going to use logic here, Arizona won the Pac-12 outright. They deserved a host, but you looked at a lot of projections and not a lot of people were giving love to the Arizona Wildcats. So I'm glad the committee got it right, but it didn't look like a surefire thing.
Well, as a group of us were walking out of Scottsdale Stadium, around 12:30 a.m., I guess that would be Sunday morning, talking about, what might happen. I was like one of the ones who was a believer. I'm like, they're going to do the right thing. They are just going to ignore the RPI, and they're going to reward a team that won both the regular season and tournament championships in a power league, a league that has won the most College World Series titles of all time, right? That's still intact at this point, right? It hasn't split apart yet. Still has USC, still has UCLA, still has Stanford. I know UCLA and Stanford were down this year, and that kind of dragged the whole league down. And, that's probably why the RPI wasn't as high as it probably should have been at 31. But I was bullish on their chances. I was hopeful. I thought, you know what, like, you got to give this to Arizona. They have earned it. Whatever the metrics say, the metrics say. The metrics are flawed. Okay. RPI is a system that rewards like the top teams that play against one another, no matter what the results are. The SEC somehow, at the SEC teams have all these quad one results because this system elevates them. And there's really, what is the justification for that? It's sort of like, it feels to me like it's based more on perception than reality. I am glad that the committee took a step back and said, hey, wait a minute. Like, no matter what the RPI says, look at the resume. Okay. Not only did they win both the regular season and tournament titles, they had the number one non-conference strength of schedule of any team in the country. Any team in the country.
Yeah.
And look at some of the teams that they faced early in the year. San Diego, they're in the NCAA tournament. Dallas Baptist, they're in. Here.
Northeastern?
Alabama, they're in. Indiana, they're in. Northeastern didn't make it, but they were ranked at the time. They were ranked at the time that they played them.
Yeah.
TCU probably should have made it. That was another team that they faced. So, and then you have Grand Canyon as well. So, Chip Hale's like, his philosophy is, hey, I'm going to challenge these guys. We're not going to shy away from anyone. I want to give them the best experience possible. And by playing all those really good teams, and they lost a lot of those games, it toughened them up. The term that guys were throwing around at media availability yesterday was battle tested. They went into the Pac-12 season battle tested, and then they ended up winning a lot of those close games because they were kind of mentally and physically ready for those challenges.
Friday night is when the party gets started for Arizona, right? 6:00 against GCU.
Yeah, Dallas Baptist and West Virginia are playing at noon. That'll be a hot one. And then Arizona at 6:00. And then, winners bracket, losers bracket. The losers play at 1:00 Saturday. The winners at 7. So, there's a lot of incentive to win, not only because you don't want to get into the losers bracket, but you get to play at night.
Yep.
There's a tricky part of the evening when it's not quite nighttime, and guys sometimes lose the ball in the sky. But I'd much rather play under the lights. We hit 100 degrees here in Tucson yesterday for the first time in 2024. That's what the forecast calls for over the weekend. It's a way better experience for the fans too. You will get a much better turnout for a night game than you will a day game. So all around, a lot of incentive to win and keep winning, which is what they did last time here. They won 3 in a row, and then that was it.
Is there any possibility that they can host a super regional?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And you know what? Here's how it sets up. Okay. So they're opposite North Carolina. All right. Chapel Hill. And the number 2 seed in the Chapel Hill Regional, LSU Tigers.
Oh.
Coached by none other than Jay Johnson. So if Arizona were to win and LSU were to win, LSU would come to Tucson. And you cannot tell me that was just a coincidence that the committee set it up that way.
Let's go.
Right?
I'm all for it.
Wow. What
Jay
a story.
Johnson in
What
the other dugout
storyline that would be. Yep.
Oh, that's great. Oh,
Can you imagine?
Oh, okay. Well, that's in the fold. Let's pray that we get those juicy storylines in Tucson, Arizona. Uh, but Lev, we talked about how the Pac-12 baseball tournament took place this past weekend in Scottsdale and how it was the last Pac-12 sporting event. And I think it's only fitting that shortly after the last Pac-12 sporting event ended, that the man who screamed Conference of Champions from the mountaintops, the man who championed this conference more than anyone, passed away. Bill Walton tragically passing away at the age of 71 years old after his battle with cancer. And it's so amazing to me that you could scroll through social media and everyone's got their own Bill Walton story. Like, you know how personable you have to be that everyone and their mother has a personal story regarding you, and it's never a bad one. I've never heard one bad Bill Walton story to where, oh, that guy was a jerk to me. That guy, to hell with him. Every single Bill Walton story you have ever heard, whether it was after he passed or before he passed, it was always something positive. Lev, I know you've had a chance to run into Bill Walton and speak with him many times. What do you think just about his life, his legacy, and any interactions that you had with him?
Yeah, I think, you said it earlier. He's one of one. There
Yeah.
has never been anyone like him. There probably will never be anyone like him. Just a beacon of positivity, gratefulness. He had serious back issues, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. I don't know the exact timeline of it, but like, and he had talked about this, like he contemplated suicide. I mean, the pain was so bad, and he had this kind of experimental surgery, and he was able to function. I don't know how much pain he was in, but obviously it was a lot less because he was able to fly around to broadcast games. He was able to ride his bike. He'd go out on these remotes, shoot these videos that they would show during the games. My wife, who works for TEP, she was just showing me this photo of him like posing by the solar panels somewhere in Tucson, with his arms like raised up into the air in that familiar pose of his. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the stories that everyone is sharing on social media. You know how social media can be sometimes. It can be a nasty place.
Yeah.
But there's also, it is a community, and it's a place where people can share their feelings and their experiences. And so many people have come out like with their Bill Walton stories. Like this guy took the time. He had unlimited intellectual and like emotional curiosity. Like he always wanted to know, like, what's your name?
Yep.
What to ask about your family? How are you doing? What's your story? He was so interested in all of the stories of all the athletes he covered and the people that he came across. Like, and it was genuine, like it wasn't just sort of surface politeness or like working the room because that's your job or whatever. Like, he genuinely seemed interested in the lives of others. Okay. And that takes a special kind of person, especially when you're famous.
Yeah.
And maybe you're in pain. Like I've heard so many times all right, let me back up here. So Matt Enzer is the head of media relations for Arizona Athletics. Okay. And Matt and Bill became very close over the last decade or so. Matt wrote a little something about Bill, posted it on social media. We ran some of it in our paper. He viewed Bill as his life coach. He clearly became something of a parental figure for Matt. And Matt would tell me all kinds of stories, about, the things that Bill would do, away from the cameras, right? And common theme, after games, he would spend an hour, maybe more, signing every single autograph and meeting every single person who wanted to come up to him and say hello. Again, it takes a really special person to do that. And he did it.
And he was also a pros pro. Our colleague Bruce Pascoe wrote a great story on him on Tucson.com about how he was so dedicated to his craft as a Pac-12 Network's analyst and also ESPN too. Like, I know people would listen to the broadcast and they hear him go on his tangents and hear him mimic animal noises, and he would just be Bill Walton, right? And it's quirky, it's weird, it's not like the normal broadcaster. But that man would spend a lot of time studying notes, reading stories on the players, and before every single game, you could see him going through his notes and looking over, what he wants to talk about on the broadcast. And anyone who wanted a picture with him or wanted to talk to him, he would politely say, after the game, find me. Talk to me after the game. I have to focus on this right now. And if that person would approach them after the game, you betcha he's going to take a picture with them or talk to them.
Yeah. And there are many stories too told by our fellow journalists about they're trying to get Walton on the phone for something, some story that they needed help on. He was busy or whatever, but he would always call back and he'd give way more time than most people would. Bill Walton, you could ask him one question and he could go on for 20 or 30 minutes. Like I told a story about when Bob Boyd, the former USC coach, had died. The news came out before a USC UCLA basketball game at Galen Center. Walton was calling the game. Of course, it made sense. Go up and talk to him. He had, gone against this guy back in the day. Started asking my question. He just cuts me off. I got this. and then he just, he said his spiel. And I didn't need to do anything else except say, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. You have a good broadcast, etc. So regarding his broadcasting, definitely wasn't for everybody, right? Bit of a polarizing figure in some ways. My take on that is if you didn't like or appreciate Bill Walton, like that's a you problem.
Yeah.
Get over yourself. Stop being so serious. I love, when I'm watching a football game, I like a Greg Olson. Like Greg Olson, he's a great analyst. I like Chris Collinsworth. They break it down, right? I love the X's and O's. But I mean, come on. It's sports. It's college basketball. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a celebration of these young people and their exploits on the court. And you could see everything that's happening. I mean, if you were not entertained by a Bill Walton broadcast, like I said, that's on you.
Yep.
That has nothing to do with him. And he was so awesome too. Like he'd go on these crazy tangents, tell these crazy stories, and but he was still watching the game and paying attention to it. He'd be like, throw it down, DeAndre, or whatever, right in the middle of the story.
Mm-hmm. Or you'd say, whoa.
Exactly. That was the greatest. That was the worst inbound pass I've ever seen. Or that was the worst inbound play in the history of basketball. And Dave Pasch, God bless him, was like the perfect straight man.
Yeah.
Right? It was such a great combination. Anytime you'd have those two on a broadcast, it was gold.
Mm-hmm. And Dave said on ESPN that, there was a point in time where during the commercial break, Bill would tell him, I love you. Just don't tell anybody about it. Hey, I'm going to grill you. I'm going to, you might be my punching bag from time to time, but just know that I have the utmost respect for you and I love you. So when I ask you, what's your name again? I'm kidding. I'm not actually asking you what your name is.
It's like Siskel and Ebert, they had a great relationship off the air. They were rivals, but they became great friends and formed this deep bond. But when they're on the air, that's the shtick, they have some different viewpoints about movies and they would go at each other. And obviously, Bill Walton and Dave Pasch had that. He also worked with many other broadcasters, Ted Robinson.
Yeah.
Roxy Bernstein was another one that he worked with a lot. And Roxy was on the call for the final baseball game. The final broadcast of a live event ever on Pac-12 networks on Friday. And then the final Pac-12 sporting event on ESPN2 on Saturday. And he delivered remarks after both of them that were very classy and heartfelt just about like what the Pac-12 has meant for him and for everyone, the Pac-12 networks, etc. He quoted his very good friend, Bill Walton, saying, "Thank you for my life," which was one of Bill's catchphrases. And again, like, I feel like Bill truly meant it because of everything that he had gone through with his back and how miserable he was and how he thought about taking his own life, and then he had this like almost this third act in his life after that surgery. And he's just, I don't know, he was just a beacon of joy.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can put it. Always just so positive, so curious, always smiling, always energetic.
And he wasn't always like that. When people forget, and it's kind of the same issue that Charles Barkley has, where people just look at Charles Barkley, the entertainer / broadcaster. But many, many years ago, he was a killer on the court. And Bill Walton could be arguably the greatest college basketball player of all time. The only reason why I don't put him above Lou Alcindor / Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is Kareem had a rule change for him. Like, they told him, no dunking. You cannot dunk in a basketball game. That's the only reason why I'll put Kareem / Lou Alcindor over Bill Walton. But if you look at Bill's resume, a 3-time National Player of the Year, a 2-time national champion, was a part of UCLA's 88-game winning streak, one of the greatest of all time, and he's a surefire Hall of Famer. If he didn't deal with those injuries, I mean, who knows what Bill Walton's career could have been. But even though he struggled initially in his first few years in Portland, I think his 4th year, that's when they finally broke through and won the title. And then he went on to have a kind of a bench role with the Boston Celtics. His NBA career didn't quite live up to his expectations, but the man still put up 19 boards a game in an NBA Finals with the Portland Trailblazers. I know people are going to look at Bill Walton, the broadcaster, but Bill Walton as a basketball player, one of the best big men that's ever been.
He had one of the strangest NBA careers that you could possibly have. These are his games played in his first several seasons: 35, 51, 65, runner-up for MVP. 58, won the MVP award. Did not play at all in 78-79. Played 14 games in 79-80. Did not play at all the next 2 seasons.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he came back. He was with the then San Diego Clippers, 33 games, 55 games, 67 games with the LA Clippers, and then career high 80 games off the bench with the Celtics in 85-86. They won the NBA title. He was, I would say, kind of like Jokic, right? Kind of like Nikola Jokic, like great vision on the court, an unbelievably good outlet passer, selfless player, like made everyone around him better, but way better defensively than Jokic. Like, he was a legitimately good shot blocker. He averaged his rookie year 2.7 blocks, his third year 3.2 blocks, his fourth year 2.5 blocks. For his career, 2.2 blocks per game. Jokic is not that kind of defender. He was just had these horrific foot injuries, and it was just like one after another, and it just totally derailed his career. I wonder if he had come along 40 years later, if it might have been different, because of the advances in modern medicine and so forth, whether they might have been able to figure out what his issue was. Of course, then they would have done load management with him, and he probably still would have played 55 or 60 games a year for those reasons. But we would have gotten more of Bill Walton, the player.
Yeah.
He had these great quotes about Jokic. Did you see that one floating around? Just about like his peripheral vision and making everyone better. And they were from like 6 years ago, before Jokic was even like we know now, like this multiple time MVP. So he could see it. He could see the type of player that Jokic was. And then so he goes from that to broadcasting, and he was known mostly in the early part of his broadcasting career for the NBA.
Yeah.
Right. It was Bill with Steve Snapper Jones
on NBC.
Whoever, I'm not sure who was doing play-by-play. But I don't know, like, he really sort of found his niche. I feel like when the Pac-12 networks formed, and he kind of became that spokesman for the Conference of Champions,
A mascot,
right?
almost.
Yeah, I mean, he was the biggest advocate
Outside of
for.
Yogi Roth.
I'd say even bigger, because more famous,
Yeah.
more out there. But he would, talk about the culture. He'd talk about the cities. He'd talk about the weather, hiking, saguaros, like the dirt.
The Temecula dirt.
He loved the West. He's a San Diego native, California kid, went to UCLA, loved the West Coast. Like I said, the biggest cheerleader for the Conference of Champions. Did he invent that term?
I don't know. I think it was honestly a slogan, but Bill Walton popularized it. He would say it every chance he got on a broadcast. He went to Helix High School.
Yeah. A lot of really good athletes went to Helix.
Chuck
High School.
Cecil, Reggie.
Yeah. Didn't Alex Smith also?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So he was sort of conspicuously silent after the USC UCLA news broke. Like, he didn't say anything publicly about it for a long, long time. He finally did issue this statement that was like a poem.
Yeah.
And I've seen multiple people say that he would people have been showing a lot of these text threads, but he would always write everything as a poem. Like, it was always commas.
Yeah.
Always commas and no periods. I strongly urge people to read Pat Forty's column about Bill on Sports Illustrated. He talked about that quite a bit, and you should go down all the way to the end. You'll notice something very unique about the ending of that particular column. But I feel like he was heartbroken.
He was.
By what happened, and the reasons that it happened, and just the idea of UCLA playing in the Big Ten, that had to just caused a malfunction in his brain.
Mm-hmm.
How could this happen? I think all of us are still kind of stunned. In that state to a degree. Really, what this makes no sense. But for him, especially, someone who grew up there, played there, loved the Pac-12 so much and everything that it represented, it had to be a devastating development for him.
My Bill Walton story, before we transition to talk a little bit of football real quick. It's kind of along the same lines as yours, Lev, where it's the only interview I've ever done where I didn't ask a single question. All I did was say, "So Sean Miller." And then he said, "Oh, Sean Miller, he continued the legacy left behind Lute Olson," and went on for 8 straight minutes. Did not stop, did not collect himself, just went on for 8 minutes about how great Sean Miller is. And then that was the end of the interview. Just thank you so much. And Bill never remembered my name. Oh, he remembered Bruce Pascoe because Bruce covered his son Luke at the U of A. And plus, Bruce has been covering U of A basketball for a long time now, and Bill has probably read a lot of his work preparing for games. But Bill always asked me what my name was, and whenever I would tell him, his response was, "I'm Bill." And just leave it at that. I'm like, "Bill, I know exactly who you are." But he was so humble enough to always introduce himself as if I had no idea who he was. That says a lot about a person.
Yes. Great story. One more thing about him, and I'm sure most people know this, but I think it's worth bringing up, is he had a stuttering problem until he was 28 years old. I personally have not had that. I know people who have had that issue, and it's very difficult. Psychologically, I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety and fear about speaking in public when that's the case. And in his late 20s, he kind of overcame that, and it felt like the dam had broken, and Bill Walton's probably like, I can talk now in front of people, and I am not going to stop talking until the day that he dies. I thought it was hilarious that they held a moment of silence for Bill Walton before the NBA game on Monday, because that's the most ironic thing that could possibly happen. Moment of silence, Bill Walton. He never stopped talking. But yeah, I just derived so much joy from like watching all those clips and just reading all these things that people have said about him. Just a real like heartfelt, genuine appreciation for a person who really kind of represented the best of humanity.
I'll always appreciate Bill Walton. That man is one of one, world-class human being. We'll always remember him. And now he'll never miss another Grateful Dead show. He'll make every single one that they have left. All right, Lev, before we get out of here, some Arizona football news, a couple of additions, one on the high school recruiting trail, one in the transfer portal. Shanko Matautia, he is a guard from New Mexico. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name correctly. But about 6'3", 330 pounds, a big offensive lineman from New Mexico, transferred to ASU for the spring and then went back into the portal. And it makes sense that he's going to Arizona, one, because his former head coach, Danny Gonzalez, is now a part of Arizona staff. So there's some familiarity there. And two, he's going to be reuniting with his buddies from Anaheim Servite High School, quarterback Noah Fafita, Tetero McMillan, linebacker Jacob Manu, and tight end Kian Burnett. And Shanko, he goes by Issei. That's the first name that he prefers to go by. But, Arizona, they were in the market for a guard, and this guy has 20 games of experience playing guard at New Mexico. So I really like what Arizona's doing. They got transfer portal prospects at running back. They're adding to wide receiver. They're adding to the offensive line. Plus, they're getting guys on the defensive line. I'm a big fan of the way Arizona is going about adding players to the portal.
You can never have enough linemen, period. Right? This one made a lot of sense. We thought he was going to go to Arizona like kind of the first time around, based on all of those connections that you had described. Noah Fafita and Tetero McMillan and Jacob Manu have done a really good job of kind of, recruiting some of their buddies, keeping that Polynesian pipeline going in a meaningful way. So you add yet another offensive lineman to the mix, 300-plus pounder.
I didn't even mention Kedrick Riscano from Ole Miss, the running back.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one of their needs. And they have done a really good, I think, like strategic job of addressing the needs that they have. I mean, we don't know how many of these players are going to pan out. The percentage is usually a little bit higher with the portal than with recruiting because, a lot of them have already played in college. So you kind of know what you're getting to a degree. But a lot of effort put into addressing the lines of scrimmage. Where they didn't lose as many guys on the offensive line as the defensive line, but they lost their best offensive lineman.
Yep.
In Jordan Morgan. We saw what that looked like in the Alamo Bowl. Like, it was rough at times when he wasn't in there. And then they lost a lot of guys on the defensive line, and they've addressed that position as well. Brought in some defensive backs too, because that cornerback position is still a little bit uncertain, which I think was a smart move. And then on the high school front, it's been a little bit slower, but pretty big breakthrough over the weekend, right?
Yeah, they got a 3-star quarterback, Robert McDaniel, who was previously committed to the Cal Golden Bears, but decided to flip to Arizona. Was recruited by Brent Brennan and his staff at San Jose State. So there's a lot of familiarity there. And then Dino Babers has also really been pressing on him in recruiting McDaniel to Tucson. So they got a commitment there. He's from Houston, California, which is about like an hour and a half inland from the Bay Area. And it's a small town. It's got about 8,000 people. And apparently, according to him, his family owns like 150 goats. He is a goat farmer. His job is to feed the goats twice a day. So getting a farmer as your quarterback, that's a little bit change of pace from the previous guys.
So look, I am like the furthest thing from like a farmer that you could possibly be. I mean, I grew up in the city of Chicago. I'm an urban kid. City boy. But I know this about like people who grew up on farms. Like they know the value of hard work,
Yep.
right? Like there's no like sleep until 11 a.m. When you're living on a farm or working on a farm. So he's going to bring that work ethic to Arizona, which is a good thing. This could be maybe the catalyst to kind of get this 25 recruiting class going. They only have 2 commits so far, and it's May 28th. It's been a little bit slow. I wrote about this a little bit in my last news and views column. Like if you look at the timeline, like Brent Brennan took over like mid-January, which was like 3 weeks after Jed Fish. Like Jed Fish came in like in late December. Okay, so that was so he had a little bit slower to get going, and Jed's staff did a lot of work in these kind of late spring, early summer months. Like this is a time where you want to kind of build your class. So I would expect a lot of movement on the high school recruiting front over the next, let's say, like 6 weeks or so before maybe the coaches take a little time off leading into training camp.
Because last year, between like June 1st and July 4th, I think Arizona got like essentially their entire recruiting class, like 18 guys or something like that. One day it felt like they got 8 commits. It was just kind of nonstop. This is that time that you're going to see a lot of commits, a lot of visits, a lot of commits. This is prime recruiting months.
Yeah, they will have camps here.
Yeah.
And I think you can have official visitors too come even in the month of June. The other thing about it is, they have been aggressive. It's not like they haven't been aggressive. Like they have been on the road.
Yeah.
They have offered a ton of guys. Like it's not like this is not a product of inactivity. I think it's just a matter of building relationships, making sure the timing is right for all parties, identifying the right players. I have a lot of faith in Brent Brennan's ability to assess talent.
Yeah.
When you're at a place like San Jose State, you are not getting the cream of the crop, right? You have to find the hidden gems out there. And he did a really good job of that, turning that program around, producing some NFL players. Now he can, kind of swim in the deeper end of the talent pool a little bit.
Yep.
Here at Arizona, and I have a lot of faith that he and his staff are gonna knock it out of the park when it comes to high school recruiting. I think I just did about 17 different analogies there. By the way, like mixed metaphor, city,
knock it out
here.
of the park.
So deep end of the pool, all kinds of stuff going on there. This is why I'm a better writer than I am a podcaster.
I was gonna say you've been talking.
I wouldn't use any of those dumb cliches in a story, but here, yeah.
You've been talking to Ryan Finley.
Well,
that was his thing.
The mixed metaphors.
Sports metaphors.
We've had many. Yes, we've had many talks along those lines. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Arizona football recruiting is in full swing this summer. We'll have all the updates. Plus, we got the Tucson region going down this week. Lev will be at the Juice Box, also known as Hi Corbett Field. He'll have all the coverage on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. Arizona softball's season, it just came to an end against Oklahoma State in the Super Regional, but a couple of Wildcats named All-Americans. Dakota Kennedy was a first-team All-American. Ali Skaggs was named to the second team, so a couple of personal honors there. And, yeah, lots going on in Tucson. Please go to Tucson.com, the Wildcaster app, for all that coverage. And as always, please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast.